Homesteads and Homeschools as part of the Liberty Hippie Podcast Network. If you like what we do, be sure to check out This Week in Liberpods. Peace Freaks, Cannabis Heals Me, and Free Markets Green Earth. We're living proof that libertarian doesn't mean washed up Republican.
So, what's up, people? Some of you listening to this might know that it wasn't out right on Tuesday morning at the normal time. I got a little behind the 8 ball. It's just been a long week, and I was feeling a little on the outs, and it took me a minute to get this all done, but it is done. And so you have episode number 93 of Homesteads and Homeschools with your guest today, Mr. Zach. Zach came on to talk about his homesteading stuff that he does and a unique hobby that he has along with it, and how he's using that to make some money on the side here and there, and hopefully some more money as time goes on. What else, Zach? What are we talking about? What's his hobby? Talking about blacksmithing. Dude makes things really hot and bends them and shapes them and makes them into cool things. Yeah, we're just gonna get into it. Check it out. He's a good dude, fun time, and come back next week. Hopefully, I will be here on time for you all. Let's go plant those liberty seeds with my guest, Mr. Zach.
And right with us, young Monday lies, with the angels on the night. Crack, wind, clatter, flash, rain, bites on an outsized unicorn. Rough shot winging sky blue lights.
My guest today is Mr. Zach, over here on the eastern seaboard with me. I don't know, is it seaboard? I guess we're close enough. I don't know.
Yeah, we're over here.
So, Zach, welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah. And so, I saw you a few things on the Twitter there that piqued my fancy. Thought it might be an interesting conversation. I don't know. So, here you are today. Where did you grow up kind of doing homesteady type stuff at all, or is this like kind of more a new adventure?
It's sort of a new thing, but I come from a long line of like homesteady farmer type people, but it's skipped a generation. So like my grandparents and great grandparents were all farmers in central Pennsylvania, and then my dad grew up in poverty after he lost his dad at a young age. And he sort of just went completely normal, everyday life, the 3 kids, wife, job that he has to work 9 to 5 every day. We moved around the country a lot, so we never really had a place to settle down. So I sort of got into like the homesteading aspects of everything sort of in college when I started doing some prepping, and doing research on all that kind of stuff for self-sufficiency and whatnot, and sort of carried it on, in a minimal way until I finished up with grad school, college, all that kind of stuff. And now I'm finally in a place where I can start doing a little bit more of what I want to do with my own property, and trying to get more self-sufficient that way. So it's a new passion, sort of, but I think it's been building, from a family tie for a long time.
Yeah, it's always been there in the background.
Yeah,
getting ready to bust out. What made you kind of start looking at the prepping sort of thing, or start doing some of that research?
Well, I think it was it was more like, I think a lot of people say that it was like 2001 when the terrorist attacks happened on 9/11. I was too young for that to really affect me, so I'm not really sure what the event was that brought me into it. But I remember that in college, I was way into reading, like speculative fiction about the end of times and all that kind of stuff. So I guess Alas Babylon by Frank, that's sort of piqued my interest a little bit, and I started looking more into it. And then I found the Survival podcast by Jack Spirko, and he sort of lays it all out as not panic driven, but preparation driven. So it's not like the stuff you see on Doomsday Preppers or anything like that. He takes it from a prepping should make your life better, even if you have a normal life going, rather than, waiting for the shit to hit the fan. And that's what I liked about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I can't remember who I spoke to somebody once upon a time about kind of a little bit about prepping, and like that there is this disconnect between like what you see on TV and what's advertised as prepping and what's actually just, it's kind of common sense, right? Like just be prepared for something that might be, not so good. We're not talking like zombie apocalypse here, but
yeah.
Something. So
no, that's the thing. It's always the common events that are the most inconvenient. So like I remember I was living in a place probably about 2-3 years ago that we got a blizzard, and I was snowed in for 3 days. And normally a lot of people would have major problems with that, but because I had all my stuff, I'm just chilling here, eating some canned food, drinking the beer that I've made, and watching TV because I didn't lose power. So it was not really a big thing. And this was, before teleworking and all that. So I didn't have to work either. So it was sort of like a little vacation.
right.
But it's definitely not, you have to take into account some of those large scale events, like nuclear war is a possibility, but how likely is it, but how likely is it that you lose your job? It's pretty likely. So prepare for the small stuff and then work your way up to the big stuff, and then you're good for pretty much anything.
Yeah, and I think that's what people don't think about, right? Like it's so if I do lose my job, I have this to fall back on. They when they hear that prepping, they're thinking nuclear war or coronavirus or that sort of thing, right? Can't, yep. But it's like the little things that you very likely could well go through, and to have that little bit of stash or backup to fall on could be useful.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you've kind of just moved. Where did you, not like where, but what did you move from, and what did you move kind of into? Like, were you in a apartment in a city somewhere, and now you're out in the country? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so I guess it was about 2 or 3 years ago. I was working right outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. So I was across the river, so it wasn't really the city. And I didn't really like that because I could still hear, the shootings going on at night across the river. But I was working, as a technical writer back then. And then I got the opportunity to join my dad and my brothers in a company that they had started. And I took that opportunity, ended up moving in with my parents up at their old place, which was way up north Pennsylvania. And then we moved our office way down south to almost the Maryland border. And I started looking for houses. I had contracts on several, and they all fell through. So as a person, late 20s, mid 30s ish, I'm living with my parents. It doesn't look good. It's a libertarian living in his mom's basement. But then finally got the chance to buy this place, and it's maybe 10, 15 miles from where my parents live now. It's not super country, but it's in the country enough, like surrounded by farms and all that kind of stuff, that it's a place that I can do what I want to do, which is really nice. And it's an old house, very solid. Super happy to have it, and still working to unpack all the stuff, but that's how it goes usually.
Yeah, it's I hate moving. It's nice in the sense that like you get to get rid of some of the junk that you've accumulated, but at the same time, it's just, man, that's oof.
Yeah, the weirdest thing is that all of my stuff fit into one garage bay at my dad's place, and I moved it in here, and I'm like, holy shit, I got a lot of stuff, and I didn't even realize it.
That's it. You go, it forces you to take inventory of everything that you have and really kind of buckle down on what you actually need. So you're kind of, you said you're able to do some of the things that you want to do. What are some of those things? I know you mentioned you brew your own beer. What else do you get into?
So my biggest thing is obviously, if anybody follows me on Twitter, they know that I'm big into blacksmithing. So I have a space here that I'm working on to actually set up an indoor or covered shop rather than the thing that I was going on back at my dad's place, which was just a stone pad out in the backyard. So that's probably number one priority right now, getting that set up, getting the wood shop like right next to it so that I can do all the handle work and stuff on tools that I make. Another big thing is gardening. I got probably a 20 by 30 vegetable garden plot out back that's already sort of there. It just needs to be tilled in and set up. But I think my most lofty goal for this place is to make a batch of beer that is completely 100% from this property. So I've got a space out back that looks like it used to be a piece of a field. I'm going to plant that with barley in the spring. I'm going to grow that out, going to thresh it, malt it, use that as my base for the beer. I'm going to grow hops. I'm going to try and culture some wild yeast, and my water is from a well. So if all goes according to plan, I'm going to be able to do a 100% property-made beer by next fall, and that would be absolutely outstanding.
That'd be impressive. When you culture yeast, when you get yeast from that, when they made beer like back in the day, was it like natural airborne yeast? Is there some sort of yeast on the barley and stuff that helps add to it? Do you know?
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been really into is the history of beer making. And back in the day, it was wild fermentations to start almost everything because they had no idea what yeast was. So it was a lot of the times the monks would put stuff in open barrels and let it get infected. And I'm sure they lost a lot of batches that way.
Yeah, for sure.
But the legend goes that the guys that would stir the mash after they put it into the barrels would never wash off the paddle and keep it in a safe place and always stir it again with that same paddle, which infected it with the right yeast. So in my case, whatever I can get here, I have to basically put out a bowl of sugary water or extra mash and let that get infected by the bacteria and the yeasts and the mold that are in my air, and then sort of try and encourage that natural yeast to grow into its own colony. And then it's still not going to be like a professional beer brewing, but it's going to be unique to this property. So it'll be interesting.
How do you prevent it from becoming like, because I've tried to do that with cider, and I've made a bunch of kombucha and stuff like that. So how do you prevent it from picking up like those sort of yeasts that less on the alcohol side, more on like the vinegary side? Because whenever I do cider, it doesn't matter. Like I cannot make a batch of cider; it turns into apple cider vinegar. End of story. So how do you prevent that? Do you know?
So it's kind of you have to go as you go through it. You sort of have to make judgment calls on it. What I've done before in the past when I've taken wild yeast is I put out a bowl. I don't let my mash or my cider sit out. I cover that up so it's not getting infected unless I infect it. So I put out like a bowl with whatever I'm trying to make in it, and then watch for the cultures. And there's a lot more scientific ways to do it. And I think I need to go back and read it, but in How to Brew, John Palmer actually goes through a little bit of wild yeast culture, and that's probably what I'm going to follow. I've only done it once before, and it was probably 10 years ago, so I'm a little rusty at it. But there's ways that you can isolate the yeast. I think it's by preparing the right type of food for them. So you're feeding them what that specific strain wants instead of what your vinegar strain wants, or that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a learning process. Definitely, I'll probably ruin a couple of batches, but that's the way it goes.
Hey, it's As long as it won't kill you drinking it, it's not ruined, right?
Exactly.
Something. Oh man, I brewed a few batches. I just never really got into it. And my brother and I one year just came up with our own recipe and used a bunch of maple. We used a bit of maple syrup, and instead of water, we used maple sap.
Oh yeah.
And man, it was awful. And then so we just let it sit in the basement. It was like, we can't just throw it out. Like that's, and came back in I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years, and found it. We're like, oh, hey, let's see what it tastes like. It was amazing. It was like the best thing ever. It's funny how the fermenting thing kind of goes. Sometimes you get really good stuff. Sometimes it's not so good. And sometimes you just got to wait.
Yeah. It's weird how some of the stuff is it's so terrible up front, but then when you let it go, it's just like manna from heaven.
Yeah.
I mean, I had one batch a while ago of mead, and it's basically just honey and water and yeast, right? So how can you screw that up? But when I tasted it after the initial fermentation, it was like rocket fuel. Like I could have made hooch out of that and sold it as white lightning, but let that sit for 6-7 months, which I guess is what you're supposed to do. But I wanted to try it anyway. That stuff turned out to be one of the best meads that I've ever had. So
Awesome. Yeah. Do you ferment anything else, or is it just the beverages?
I do sauerkraut. I've actually when I moved in here, the people that used to own it, they had probably 4 or 5 tomato plants out back, and they're still producing tomatoes. And I have no use for that many tomatoes, so I went out there. I picked a bunch of green ones, and I'm trying a lacto fermentation of green tomatoes now to see what that's like.
Interesting. I've fermented a bunch of things like that, like random. I did some dill, lettuce, stuff like that. I've not tried tomatoes. Have you read anything about that or seen that mentioned anywhere?
I found a few recipes for lacto fermented green tomatoes online, but it seems to be an outlier. The big thing people like to do with it is a quick pickle of green tomatoes, and I did some of that too, and it turned out pretty tasty. It's just like a store bought dill pickle almost without the crunch. But
Interesting.
I'm hoping for the best because I don't really like tomatoes that much, but I didn't want to wait.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Interesting. That's I'd be curious to hear how that comes out, and let me know. Because we don't do well with tomatoes down here. Sometimes we do, but
I guess you guys have more blight down there with the humidity and stuff, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just our garden is we gotta do something with it. We gotta fix it up because it's been beat up for years and years and years, and doesn't matter how much we amend the soil, and our soil's crap to begin with. So, but yeah, tomatoes are tough because it's getting them in the right time of year because it gets hot so fast. So I think it's about 90 degrees, 92 degrees during the day, and then I think if it doesn't drop below, oh god, I don't know, 70, 74 or something, the blossoms won't set, and so it just aborts all the fruit or whatever, and so you have a hot spell early on, and it just kind of messes everything up. At least that's what I've found. But.
Yeah, I could see that being a big problem. We had a really hot summer up here this year, and the tomato plants my mom planted, they didn't produce anything until September, and then they put on a bunch. So it's definitely a big weather dependent thing.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Yep.
Do you grow your cabbage, or are you going to try to?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to grow cabbage. In previous batches of sauerkraut that I've done, my one buddy who lives over near Reading, he was growing so much cabbage he didn't know what to do with it, so he brought 5 heads down to me. I made a 5-gallon batch, he made a 5-gallon batch, and then we met up and taste tested the differences, and both of them were really good, but they were actually really different because that wild fermentation aspect. So that was a cool experiment.
So you guys both let them kind of ferment on their own?
Yeah, we threw them into 5-gallon buckets. He took his back to Reading and set it in his basement. He put an airlock on it after it started going, so it was infected with whatever was in his basement. So that worked out pretty well for him. And I did the same sort of thing here. And yeah, they were very similar, but very different in other ways too. So
interesting. That's kind of cool. So I'm curious about the blacksmithing, the smithing there. I don't even know. Like, how do you get into that? How do you like, when you wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I'm going to go make some metal really, really freaking hot, try not to burn myself, and smash it and pick up heavy hammers all that. Like, how does that happen?
So I keep thinking back to somebody else asked me this recently, and I was thinking back to why I would have gotten into this at all. And I think it started as an idea from when I was a kid. We went to like a Civil War recreation thing in the Gettysburg area, and the blacksmith that was there gave me a nail, and I still have that nail, but I didn't really think about it for the next 20 years. And a lot of people think, was it Forged in Fire or something, that the knife making show on the History Channel or something like that. I never really watched that either, so I'm not sure what got into my head, but just one day I started looking up how to blacksmith and how to get into it, and it's sort of intimidating. As you can imagine, it's just like, where do you even start? And it can be very expensive is the big hurdle. But if anybody wants to get into it, it's actually not that hard to get started. You're not going to get perfect results, but you can get started with just 2 bread tins, a Harbor Freight anvil, a barbecue grill, lighting fan, and a hammer, and tongs, or you can use vice grips, something like that, if you don't have tongs. But it's basically the bread tins. You line those with plaster of Paris, put a tube down through the bottom so you can inject air down underneath it. And I always use charcoal because it gives me the best result. But you basically clamp 2 of those together so you have a clamshell with a little hollow space in the middle of it. Put your charcoal in there, and then you light it and put your barbecue grill fan on it. Crank it until you get up to a really hot heat. Throw some metal into it, pull it out, and hammer it on your Harbor Freight anvil, and you're basically blacksmithing at that point. And then from there, if you really like it, you start spending a lot of money, which I've done. But I mean, I was lucky enough to find my dad's cousin's father had been a farrier for a very long time, and he had an anvil sitting in his barn that he wanted to get rid of. So I got that thing for $300. It's a 100-pound anvil. The equivalent would be probably $1,500 to buy it new. Found a post vise on Craigslist for $100 or something like that. Those things go for $600 new. And hammers and stuff. It's just you acquire a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And I acquired tongs, started making my own tongs, and on from there.
So how do you like when you start scaling up and you make your oven or buy your oven, like how big is that? Where do you have that set up, and what can you actually make with it? Like how.
Well, so the first part there with the forge, you can
forge. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're
Called
good.
It oven.
It's all terminology, man. It's no big deal. The first thing I started with after I did the little bread tin things, I built what's called just a box of dirt forge. So basically you just take 2x4s and 2x6s, build a box that's on legs, fill that with dirt. And then you slide a pipe in through the side, and I used a mattress pump as my bellows. So you stick that on the side, and then that delivers your air. You can put coal or charcoal in that, and you can forge with that. I really like charcoal over coal because around here, all you can get is anthracite coal, and that does not burn well. So you don't get really good results with that. And then I got sort of tired. Go ahead.
Where do you find this stuff, like the coal and the anthracite coal? I mean, that has very little meaning to me. Like where, like how do you, like, are there specialty shops? Is this just stuff you can get at like the hardware store, or like what?
Yeah, there's a couple of options. I mean, there's 2 types of coal that you would use in blacksmithing other than charcoal. One is bituminous coal, which is sort of like fluffier coal, and that stuff is really hard to find. It's only mined in like 2 places in the U.S. Anthracite coal is basically what made Pennsylvania like the coal capital of the U.S. for a while. That stuff's everywhere, but that I get that stuff at not Harbor Freight, Tractor Supply. They have bags of that for home heating. If you want bituminous coal, you have to find a place that has it, or you can go online to buy it, but it's like $50 a bag. And I don't want to be spending that kind of money. And then there's also another thing you can throw in there, which is called coke. That's already burnt up coal. It's just the remnants of coal. So like the charcoal form of coal. And that stuff's really good, but that's like $70 a bag. So I'm not buying that either. Charcoal is what was used for thousands of years. So I stick with that. You get super hot heat. I've actually melted steel when I turned my back on it for too long and ruined an entire project. But charcoal you can find anywhere. It's the lump charcoal, not the briquettes. Briquettes don't burn right, so you don't want to use that. But yeah, the lump charcoal, like cowboy stuff or royal oak, is what I use. It smells good and it's hot, so I'll use that all day long. But yeah, after that, just a box of dirt forge. I got tired of the small heating area that coal gives you. So I went out and I bought a propane forge from a place called Devil Forge. They're over in Lithuania. And they have an eBay store. I think it was like $150 shipped, and it doesn't get as hot as charcoal, but it does more than what I need for it. And that's actually pretty small. It would fit on a desktop, but I sit it on top of the just a box of dirt forge, and that works out pretty well. Big problem with that is with those huge propane burners, you go through a lot of propane really quick, so it's a little bit more expensive. But I've started selling some of my stuff to offset the cost, so it's starting to work out all right.
Awesome. So what are you making?
So the thing that most people are going to start out with, if they start with this, is what I did, is you make decorative hooks for the most part. So I did that for a very long time, made probably 150, 200 hooks. So many hooks that nobody else wants any hooks in my family anymore. But
like zucchinis.
Yeah, exactly. You have to get rid of them or they just pile up. Then I moved on to, I made some nails and stuff like that just to hone the fine points of the craft. Made some chisels, some punches, mostly just stuff that I needed as a blacksmith, because that's one of the things you don't really think about is there's a lot of specialized tools in this. And if you buy all of them, you're going to go broke. So I'm making punches, chisels, cutoffs. There's these things called hardy tools. In an anvil, there's this thing called a hardy hole that you put these tools in, and you bend stuff with it, bending forks, all that kind of stuff. And I sort of moved on to things that I thought people would want to buy. So I make dinner bells. Those things are really, really nice. And then, hammers. And then on Twitter, Quincy, what's his name now? I don't even remember.
Yeah. The fat chick guy.
Yeah, fat chicks are awesome. That's what it is. He requested that I make him a Warhammer type thing. So I went ahead and I made what I could out of that. It wasn't exactly what he wanted, but then I showed it to him and sent it to him, and he's pretty pleased with that. So I'm happy about that one. But then I guess what I'm moving into now is another follower on Twitter sent me a piece of art and asked if I would make her some hanging basket brackets for her backyard to screw into fence posts. So as soon as I get my shop set up, that's where I'm going next.
That's awesome. So you're getting some custom jobs there.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that Twitter has led to being able to actually make stuff for people.
Yeah, for sure. I hate that place, but
yeah, it's a hell site, but there's some good people on it.
So you, this is just like a hobby at this point, right?
Yeah. My main gig is the company that my dad and my brothers and I run. We do security gates, hollow metal doors, automatic doors, all the stuff that's getting screwed up in all the riots that are coming.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember the second year we were in business, there was a riot down in Baltimore. I think it was the Freddie Gray police murder. And we made a lot of bank on that one. And now it's coming down to like Philly and the DC riots that happened a couple of months ago, and Baltimore. They're all going to shit. So we're constantly busy. So the blacksmithing thing is sort of on a little bit of a hold. I have maybe a day out of the week to try and get my shop set up. So that's working out.
Now, when you get your shop up and you go to work on a project, how much time do you need to work on it? Is it something you can do like a half hour here, an hour there? I imagine not, but
well, it depends on the on what you're making. There's a lot of things that you can sort of just start and then you can stop and pick it up later. That don't really matter. There's some things that are specialized, like if you're making knives or a hammer or something like that, you really need to get the base of it done so that it can cool in the right way, that it's soft enough to work with the next time you're on it. So like a knife, I'll get the entire thing beat out into its rough shape, and then I stick it into it's basically like a ceramic gravel material. I stick it in there so it cools down very slowly, and that's normalizing it. Basically taking the stresses out of the metal so you don't get cracks and stuff in it later. Then next time I pick it up, I get it up to a certain heat. It depends on what alloy you're working on, but most of the high carbon steels that you make a good knife out of, you take it up to about a dull red heat, about, I want to say 800 to 900 degrees Fahrenheit. And
it's
then,
hot.
yeah. And then with those, you got to stick those at that temperature into like an oil quench or a water quench, depending on what steel it is. So I use vegetable oil in my oil quenches, and you quench that, stick it down in so it starts to cool, pull it out, and you scrape off part of it and see if it's still hot enough to make the steel turn color. And if it is, you got to cool it some more. But once that's done, it's hardened, and then you have to get it into an oven for about 2 hours at 400 degrees, 500 degrees, somewhere in there, to temper it so that it's not brittle. So it's, when you're making tools and stuff like that, it's critical to know a little bit of metallurgy in it. But most of the stuff that I'm making, like decorative stuff, it really doesn't matter. Say I'm going out to start a hook. A hook is going to take me maybe 15 minutes to complete one. I'm trying to get that down with some jigs and stuff like that so I can actually mass produce them for customers when I get an Etsy shop going. But most of the stuff is pretty easy. It's the tough stuff is where you have to like do complex bends and scrolling work and all that kind of stuff. So it really does just depend on what you're making at that point.
All right, well, sounds good. I wasn't sure it was getting the heat going. I would think you just try to get it all done in one shot, but it sounds like you have to let it cool to some degree at some point.
Yeah, and that's why I like to work on multiple projects at one time, so I can make use of that heat. With propane, it takes probably 5-10 minutes for it to heat up to forging temperature. With coal, you got 5-10 minutes to get that fire really going. And I don't want to, just do one thing after waiting for 10.
Is there a way to extinguish the coal to kind of hold on to the heat for later, like bring it back later? Or once you get it going, is it kind of?
Well, with charcoal, it sort of just burns. You got to pull what you want to save out. With regular like bituminous or anthracite coal, you can bank the fire, so you get like the really hot ball down in the base of the forge, and you just pile up coal on top of that, and you probably got about 2-3 hours. You can come back and still get that going. But yeah, it's sort of a once and done thing on most fuels.
All right, well, I appreciate you taking the time out this morning to do this. If people are interested in I don't know, seeing some of your work or getting you to maybe make something or talk to you or anything, where can we go? What should we do?
Yeah, it's main thing is going to be Twitter. It's at Zarathanarchy. And then I worked on a website. It's not done yet, so I'm not going to plug that yet. But yeah, Twitter's probably the best place. I'm also on Discord on some of those servers with some of the Twitter people that are leaving. But yeah, just feel free to send me a message, and I'm always happy to talk to people.
All right, sounds good. I will do that when you get your website set up. Let me know.
Yeah, we'll do, man.
Put that on here too.
All right,
man. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed that. I don't think blacksmithing is anything that I will get into anytime soon. I have lots of other projects to work on, but it is something that it might be useful just to tinker with, to toy with, to figure out, is this something that I could actually do? Could I actually make a hook or a nail or do something? How does this all work? It's a very curious process, at the very least. So if you're interested, check it out. Go hit him up on the Twitter. See if you can get him to make you something. I'm sure he would be willing. Guys, that's all for today. Go check out the show notes, homesteadsandhomeschools.com/093. Go over homesteadsandhomeschools.com/Amazon, click through the link and start buying your Christmas presents and all that stuff through there. And if you feel so inclined, go to patreon.com/thelibertyhippie and set yourself up with a subscription there. Help out the show. The last thing I'll tell you to do for me is to go and leave a review on iTunes. Share this show with a friend. Pass the word around and let people know. I guess that's all. Get out there, you guys. Sow those seeds of liberty. We can all reap seeds of freedom together.